I've seen car crashes with better planning than this. Marcus sneered, tapping his Rolex against a glass conference table like a countdown to someone's execution. Uninspired, safe corporate oatmeal. He flicked a bound copy of my 20-page strategic proposal across the polished surface, like it was something he wouldn't wipe his shoe with. It landed with a slap, loud enough to kill the oxygen in the room. 20 pages of blood, sweat, spreadsheets, late-night analytics, and real-world problem-solving reduced to a projectile insult. I didn't flinch, not externally. I'd learned that in my first year climbing this broken corporate ladder. Never let them see you bleed. But inside was a rupture, a pressure crack in a dam that had been holding back years of underpaid brilliance and uncredited ideas. Marcus leaned forward in his custom Italian chair, arms out like he was blessing the room. Look, appreciate the effort. I do. You've clearly put in the hours, but this isn't the future. It's a very safe yesterday. He shot me that weaponized smile he always used when he wanted to make you feel like a child who just peed their pants during a piano recital. We're not trying to maintain the status quo here. We're trying to blow it the hell up. I kept my eyes steady on his, even as my stomach twisted into a knot so tight it felt like it was trying to garrote my spine. The others around the table, they were already looking down, already pretending to be deeply interested in the condensation on their water glasses. Some scribbled fake notes. Some nodded at nothing. No one spoke. I scanned the faces. Isla from compliance, Jordan from ops, Tina from product. All of them had either praised his plan in private or helped shape it. But here, under Marcus' spotlight, they were mute statues in a wax museum of cowards. I'm sorry, Cynthia, Marcus said, rising slightly to adjust his blazer. Navy, sharp, stupid, expensive. We didn't bring you on board to draft a user manual. We brought you here to be a disruptor. And right now, you're not shaking anything. He tapped the plan again. Try harder. There was a pause, a deep sucking silence that made the hum of the fluorescent lights feel like jet engines. He turned to the rest of the room. Thoughts? Nobody had any. Not that he wanted them. Not really. Marcus didn't ask questions to hear answers. He asked to hear agreement. And in this kingdom of hushed obedience, every nod was a survival tactic, every silence a shield. Then he did something worse than insulting my work. He looked at me and winked, that smug little eye twitch, like we shared an inside joke, like he expected me to laugh along with the game he was playing. It was the same wink he gave when he stole my budget-saving operations revamp last quarter and pitched it to the board as his own gut instinct breakthrough. It was the wink of a man who'd built his career looting the minds of people like me and rebranding it as leadership. I stood, stacked my notes neatly, mechanically, and nodded once, just to get my legs moving. As I turned to leave, I caught his voice drifting lazily after me like a mosquito buzz. Workshop something better next week. Something with teeth. I made it to the restroom without snapping, locked the stall, sat down, and for 3 full minutes, I stared at the door like it was a portal to another world. One where merit mattered and smug little kings didn't run empires with sugar-dusted slogans and cheap performance theater. Then I cried. Not loud, not ugly, just silent tears from a rage too tight to scream, from a betrayal too old to feel fresh. I'd given them everything. I'd skipped holidays with my aging parents to finish financial models. I'd pulled 2 a.m. shifts to rework supply chain data before quarterly reviews. I knew where the company was bleeding and how to stitch it. I wasn't just competent. I was the damn backbone of their last 3 profitable pivots. And he called me safe. Safe was the word men like Marcus used when they couldn't stomach that a woman had thought 3 steps further than them. He was right about one thing. My plan didn't have teeth. Not yet. The following Tuesday, Marcus strutted into the boardroom like he'd just invented capitalism. He was holding a fresh bound strategy packet with a glossy navy blue cover. And I knew before he even opened his mouth, that it was mine, or at least a bastardized, overdosed on buzzwords version of it. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, placing the packet ceremoniously in front of each board member like he was dealing royal flushes. What you're about to see is bold, aggressive, unapologetically visionary. I watched, stone-faced, as he clicked the remote and launched into a pitch that had the same skeleton as my proposal, but none of its muscle. He'd stripped of the cost controls, gutted the operational safeguards, added projections that would make a Vegas bookie nervous. And worst of all, he was selling it with my phrasing, word for word in some places. Decentralized vendor resilience strategy, phase burn reduction to improve cache agility, Q3 ref factor pivot. That was me, all of it. But now it was coming out his mouth, dressed in manic overconfidence and a suit that probably cost more than my annual student loan payments. I sat there, blinking slowly, heat rising in my cheeks, my stomach tying itself in knots made of acid and disbelief. And the board, oh, they ate it up, nodding like bobbleheads in a hurricane, tossing out phrases like forward-leaning and game-changing, like they just discovered fire. He was stealing my work in real time, not even trying to hide it, just polishing it with a layer of high-risk crap to make it glossier and more dangerous, like duct taping rockets onto a bicycle and calling it a transportation revolution. After the meeting, I cornered him in the hallway outside the executive lounge. There was a framed quote behind him that said, "Fortune favors the bold." I almost laughed at how goddamn cliche it all was. "Marcus," I said, voice low, controlled, "you took my plan, word for word in some places." He grinned, like he was flattered. "I improved it." "No, you butchered it. Removed every safeguard, inflated projections, and now you're pushing it as your own. That is not innovation. That's plagiarism with a death wish." His face didn't change, not even a flicker. He just stared at me for a long beat, then said, "Cynthia, if you want to have this conversation, we can have it in my office." I knew what that meant. I followed anyway. I wasn't done. His office smelled like citrus and delusion. He sat behind his monolithic desk and folded his hands, giving me that faux patient look he reserved for lawsuits and interns. "Look," he began, "I get it. You're upset. You feel like you weren't heard." I wasn't heard, Marcus. I was robbed. "Careful," he said, holding up a finger. "This attitude, it's exactly what's been holding you back. You're brilliant, Cynthia, but you're also combative. Negative. You fixate on problems instead of presenting solutions." I barked a laugh. That was the solution. The one you took. The one you're now parading around like it came to you during a vision quest on your Peloton. He stood slowly, walked around the desk like a priest preparing last rites. "You know what your problem is?" he asked, almost kindly. "You think being right is enough, but perception is reality. And right now, you're coming across as bitter, ungrateful." He opened the office door wide. The hallway was busy, mid-morning chaos. People shuffling with coffees and notepads and fake purpose. I stepped toward the exit, trying to keep my jaw from cracking under the pressure of restraint. But he wasn't done. Loudly, loud enough for half the floor to hear, he said, "Cynthia, this just isn't working out. Your attitude is toxic, and your behavior is insubordinate. You're fired." The hallway went dead silent. Someone dropped a pen. An intern gasped. And then he said it. "You'll never work in this town again." He was casting a spell, like he thought he was a goddamn sorcerer in pinstripes. I just stood there, blinking, lips parted, brain on pause. I should have screamed. Should have thrown something. Should have at least said, "You're a fraud, and I hope your high-risk plan bankrupts you." But nothing came out. My body shut down, a defense mechanism honed over years of corporate cage fights. So I left, walked to the elevator with a slow, deliberate pace, clutching my laptop like a life raft. When the doors closed, I didn't cry. I laughed, not a joyful laugh. Not even a bitter one, just a strange hollow sound that filled the space like a ghost dragging chains. Because I realized something right there in that mirrored elevator. He hadn't just fired me, he'd set the fuse. There's a very specific kind of silence that settles in your apartment the first week you don't have a job to wake up for. It's not peaceful. It's not restful. It's a thick metallic quiet, like the inside of a sealed tin can. You start measuring time in coffee refills and how long the sun takes to crawl across your blinds. I told myself it was a break, a pause, just a blip before the offers rolled in. But by week 3, the silence had teeth. I had applied to 23 jobs, Heard back from two. One was a botched autoresponse that referred to me as Dear Applicant Number 771. The other was a recruiter from a visionary skincare startup who ghosted me after I asked if they paid above minimum wage. I'd spent years building a reputation, a real one, actual results, real metrics. But suddenly, it felt like I didn't exist. Or worse, I did exist, but with a sticky note on my file that said, Do not hire difficult woman who dared to speak. And that's when the paranoia started to metastasize into something colder. I knew Marcus' reach extended far. He was golf buddies with a handful of high-powered execs, and he'd once bragged about having a speed dial red list for problem employees. I used to laugh at that back when I thought I was too competent to ever make the list. Now, I wasn't so sure. My inbox was a graveyard of rejections and ghostings. Even companies I'd worked with before, people who would praise my work, suddenly weren't returning emails. I started cross-referencing job listings with my sent folder like a detective, mapping out a conspiracy. Was I being blackballed, or was I just no longer relevant? I cut back. First, it was the small things. No more DoorDash, no more overpriced lavender lattes that tasted like air freshener. Then I canceled my gym membership. Then Hulu. Then the co-working space I'd barely use anyway. It was down to instant ramen and one-ply toilet paper and the kind of box wine that comes with a screw cap and a printed warning label about sulfites. By week 5, I was sitting cross-legged on my sofa at 2 a.m., swaddled in a fleece blanket that smelled vaguely like depression and expired candle wax, sipping my dinner from a tumbler while scrolling through job sites that felt like dating apps for sociopaths. Team player needed for dynamic, fast-paced environment. Translation: will burn you alive and call it character building. Looking for a rock star? Translation: must work 70 hours a week for the price of a Chipotle burrito. Every posting felt like a door I couldn't knock on without also swallowing my pride, my voice, and probably a little of my soul. One night, I cracked open an old work file just to feel something. I found a version history on my rejected proposal. The original one. My fingerprints were all over it. The logic, the care, the detail. It was good. It was damn good. And it didn't matter. Not anymore. Marcus had dragged my name through whatever back channel he had access to. He hadn't just stolen my work. He'd erased my future with it. I stared at the screen until the lines blurred. And then I laughed again. That same sound from the elevator. Hollow, detached. My sanity was tap dancing on a frozen lake, with cracks forming under every step. There was one job left in my bookmarks. I hadn't touched it. The posting was vague, borderline sketchy, seeking discreet strategic analysts with corporate restructuring experience. High reward, discretion mandatory. I hadn't applied because it sounded like code for laundering money in the Cayman Islands. But now I had nothing left to lose. Started with a glass of Pinot Grigio that tasted like vinegar and regret and a half-hearted mutter. Let's burn something on the way out. The job posting had been sitting in my browser tabs like a dare. Discreet strategic analyst. Must have extensive experience in corporate diagnostics, turnaround modeling, and unflinching objectivity. High reward, NDA guaranteed. It didn't list a company name. No logo, just a contact. A Phoenix Capital email address, clinical. No first name, no LinkedIn trail. Just submit@finkstrat.com. My gut said scam. My brain said waste of time. But my heart, the part of me still clinging to a threadbare sense of professional dignity, said, why the hell not? I opened a blank doc, stared at the cursor. It blinked at me like it was bored. And then, without thinking, without outlining or editing or giving a single damn about corporate polish, I started typing. Not a cover letter, a manifesto. 3 years of half-swallowed truths came roaring out of my fingertips like I was exorcising a demon. No cliches, no fluff, just cold, brutal clarity. I broke down every corner that company Marcus had infected, like an autopsy performed in real time. I wrote about the manipulated cash flow and how he floated the illusion of solvency by delaying vendor payments past contractual thresholds. Detailed the pipeline he built on fantasy projections just to appease bored appetites, and the shell game of reassigning dead projects into experimental innovation pods to avoid admitting failure. I explained how mid-level managers were burning out because they were shouldering entire verticals, while Marcus played Emperor on LinkedIn, how the supply chain delays weren't weather-related, the direct result of killing the Asia-Pacific distributor contract to save a few bucks, which had cost millions in backlog units. And then I went deeper. I pulled numbers, embedded charts, cited internal Slack convos, anonymized but exact. I included excerpts from department feedback loops that Marcus had ignored because they didn't come gift-wrapped in buzzwords. Even included a chart I'd built showing the correlation between his press releases and our stock dips, because apparently Wall Street could smell his bullshit too. I didn't dress it up, didn't beg, didn't ask for an interview or slap on a peppy. I'm passionate about transformation. At the end, I closed it with one sentence. If you want to know what's really going wrong inside that company and how to weaponize it, I'm your girl, but I won't chase you. Then I hit send. About 4 seconds later, I felt weightless, like I'd thrown a brick through the window of a mansion I'd been locked out of for years. The kind of freedom you feel when the consequences no longer matter because everything's already on fire. Then I shut the laptop, curled into my blanket, and passed out on the couch to the dull hum of an ancient box fan and the voice of some true crime narrator talking about a guy who faked his own death using a canoe and an expired passport. The morning after, I forgot I even sent it. I figured the email would float into some spam folder and get flagged by an algorithm for having too many attachments and not enough synergy. I figure I'd go back to job boards and rejection silence and the slow erosion of everything I'd worked for. But 36 hours later, I got a reply, one sentence. We've been waiting for someone like you. The call came less than 2 hours after their email. No small talk, no HR script, just a low, confident voice that sounded like it had personally outmaneuvered governments before breakfast. Cynthia, this is Helena Kane, executive partner at Phoenix Capital. We'd like to meet. Immediately. The next thing I knew, I was in the back seat of a black Lincoln sedan that smelled like new leather and clean decisions. The driver handed me a bottle of water with no label and said nothing the entire ride. We pulled into an underground garage below a glass tower I'd never noticed before. No signage, no front-facing brand, just brushed steel and mirrored windows that looked like they judged people for breathing inefficiently. Inside, the office looked more like a war room than a workspace. No art, no ferns, just long glass tables, soundproof walls, and the hum of machines processing data, like it owed them money. Women in quiet suits move around with surgical precision. No one loitered. No one smiled. And then Helena Kane entered the room. She was wearing a black pantsuit so sharply tailored it could slice fruit. Her hair was gray, coiled back like a threat, and her heels didn't click. They punctuated. She walked straight up to me. No handshake. Your file, she said, tapping the bound copy of my manifesto. It's the most precise diagnostic of Vance and Whitaker I've ever seen. We've been circling them for 6 months, waiting for a crack in the armor. You didn't just give us a crack, Miss Lang. You handed us the blueprints for demolition. I blinked. You were already planning to take them over. She smiled just slightly. Let's just say we enjoy liberating underperforming assets from arrogant idiots. She motioned for me to sit. We don't want to hire you as an analyst. We want you as our lead consultant. You'll be point on the acquisition, the restructuring plan, and post-takeover transition. Full strategic control. I stared at her, trying to decide if this was real or some elaborate prank by a vengeful ex-colleague with production skills. Let me be clear, she added, folding her arms. This is not a pity offer. This is not vengeance tourism. This is war. You've seen the battlefield better than anyone else. We just have the tanks. I swallowed. You want me to help you gut the company that just fired me? No, she said, leaning in. We want you to rebuild it after we strip out the rot. We just happen to believe your former boss is the rot. The first time in weeks, I felt heat in my chest. Not rage, not panic. Something colder, something cleaner, like steel sliding into place. I was escorted to a side room with a stack of NDAs thicker than a phone book. I signed them all, Every clause within clauses. And then they gave me access to their war chest. Financial reports, acquisition models, internal data, even surveillance footage from lobby cams and recorded shareholder calls. They'd been watching Marcus longer than I had. That night, they flew me first class to their satellite operations center in Chicago. I was given a private suite in a glass high-rise with a kitchen I'd never used and blackout curtains that meant business. There was already a manila folder waiting on the desk. Inside, a full list of Vance and Whitaker leadership, department heads' budget lines, departmental profit-to-loss ratios, HR complaints, even a spreadsheet titled Redundancies to be Evaluated, which I would soon be authorized to edit. I sat there under the cold LED light, staring at the evidence of my new reality. I wasn't just back in the game. I was holding the playbook. I was writing the damn rules. Marcus once told me I'd never work in this town again. Now I was holding the scalpel that would dissect his empire, piece by trembling piece. It was like going to war with a spreadsheet and a scalpel. The weeks that followed blurred into a series of 18-hour days fueled by black coffee, tactical silence, and a quiet hum of Phoenix Capital's war engine grinding toward corporate conquest. I wasn't just working. I was excavating, dissecting Vance and Whitaker like a coroner on deadline, peeling back layers of rotten pretense to find a few good bones still worth saving. And God, were they buried deep. Phoenix gave me a team of 5, each one sharper than a guillotine and just as fast. We weren't analysts. We were demolition surgeons. Every department's numbers were dragged into daylight. We audited software licenses, physical inventory counts, vendor contracts, even Slack logs. Nothing was sacred. Nothing escaped. And buried inside a cluster of expense reports from Marcus' executive account, I found her. Consulting services, $8,200 per monthly retainer. Same line, same invoice template, month after month. At first, it looked legitimate, if overpriced. But a closer look. The company address was a UPS store in Glendale. The EIN was registered to a woman named Sloan Avery. I clicked her LinkedIn out of morbid curiosity. Of course. Blonde, early 30s, former model turned innovation coach. Zero business credentials, plenty bikini shots next to quotes like, "The only thing stopping you is your fear of success." A quick reverse image search revealed she was also tagged in several party photos, standing next to Marcus at charity galas, often in dresses that screamed expense write-off. I cross-referenced the name with hotel bookings from the company credit card. 2 matches, weekend business retreats at boutique spas. One invoice even noted a couple's massage as a team alignment session. I printed the receipts, stapled them together, labeled the packet in red Sharpie. Girlfriend fraud. Phase 1. But even as I uncovered his idiocy and vanity in ever more creative formats, the work started to shift into something bigger, deeper. Because underneath the circus of Marcus' ego and falsified glamour, there were people trying to make things work. Whole departments clinging to logic, keeping the place from crumbling with duct tape and unpaid overtime. Operations had 3 unsung heroes holding down a 10-person workload. They'd streamlined vendor contracts under the table, cut raw material costs by 15%, and never once got public credit. HR had a mid-level director who'd fought tooth and nail to keep harassment complaints from vanishing into Marcus' email black hole. Finance had one soft-spoken woman, Sharon, age 61, who manually corrected quarterly reports that Marcus tweaked for board optics. I made lists to keep, to reassign, to terminate, to investigate. It felt clinical at first, but slowly, methodically, the fog lifted. I wasn't just planning revenge. I was writing a blueprint for recovery, one that would actually work if implemented by people with spines and vision. Each decision was a cut, not all of them painless. I killed the entire product strategy team. They were dead weight, handpicked by Marcus for loyalty, not skill. I flagged IT procurement for fraud. 2 ghost vendors funneling fake equipment purchases that led to a P.O. box in Florida. I recommended a full restructuring of C-suite titles, demoting 4 execs and eliminating Marcus' Chief Vision Officer role entirely. The irony almost gave me hives. At night, I would lie in a hotel bed, staring at the ceiling fan blades slice in the dark, feeling the old me, corporate soldier, polite dissenter, silent fixer, fade like static. I mourned her briefly. She deserved more. She deserved loyalty and recognition, and the kind of leadership that didn't steal and smile and wink. She also never would have done this. This woman, the one I was becoming, knew how to swing the axe, knew where to strike, and more importantly, she knew who was still worth saving. It wasn't vengeance anymore. It was reclamation. And when this was over, Marcus wasn't just going to lose his corner office. He was going to lose the lie he built around himself, one exposed invoice at a time. The elevator doors opened with a hiss. I stepped into the lobby of Vance and Whitaker, wearing black. Black heels, black slacks, black silk blouse under a blazer that whispered money. Hair slicked back. No jewelry. No bag. Just a manila folder in one hand and the full weight of corporate judgment in the other. Reception froze mid-sentence when they saw me. Not recognized, registered. Eyes widened, mouths closed. The receptionist, Kelsey, who once complimented my shoes and forwarded my emails to Marcus without telling me, stood so quickly her chair wheeled back and hit the wall. I didn't stop walking, didn't smile, didn't blink. My heels echoed across the marble like gunshots. The acquisition had gone through that morning quietly, cleanly. Phoenix Capital never made a scene. They didn't need to. When you control the money, you don't need theatrics. An hour ago, every executive had received the email. Effective immediately. Phoenix Capital now holds controlling interest in Vance and Whitaker. Leadership restructuring will begin today. That was all it said. But now I was here in the flesh, and people noticed. I passed the break room where I once cried into a paper cup of stale coffee after Marcus rewrote my strategy document and presented it as visionary insight. Today, someone inside spilled their yogurt. Whispers started in clumps, a murmur behind cubicles, a gasp near the printer. One of the interns, new, young, clueless, opened his mouth to speak and got elbowed silent by someone older who knew what a storm looked like when it walked in, wearing heels. I turned left at the corridor, Marcus's wing. It still reeked of cedar and ego. The double glass doors to the executive suite were open. His assistant stood to block me, recognition dawning just half a second too late. Miss Lang, he's in a... I walked past her like she was furniture, and there he was, Marcus Vance, in his stupid designer loafers and watch-heavy wrist, leaned back in his throne on a desk chair, sipping green juice like it gave him power. He was laughing, actually laughing, at something on his phone. Then he looked up. I watched the gears in his head grind. The smirk died. The juice cup lowered, shoulders straightened, as if posture alone could undo fate. I stopped 10 feet from his desk, watched him try to place it. First confusion, then dawning realization, then fear. He stood. Cynthia, what? I opened the manila folder and laid it on the table without a word. Inside, his own expense reports, flagged, annotated, tabbed, all neatly tied to the name Sloan Avery. His hand hovered above them, like he could absorb the damage through osmosis. He didn't touch it. Is this a joke? He said, voice thin. I finally spoke. You'll be briefed in the conference room in 15 minutes. Until then, you're to remain in your office. Do not call anyone. Do not delete anything. IT is watching every keystroke. This is your only warning. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I turned and left. Outside his office, 2 directors were pretending not to loiter. They turned, saw my face, and parted like the Red Sea. As I made my way to the glass conference room at the center of the floor, the one Marcus used to dominate like a game show host, I passed a cluster of cubicles where I once spent nights fixing problems no one would admit existed. Someone whispered, "Is that her?" Someone else answered, "She's the one." I didn't stop walking. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let him stew. The real meeting hadn't started yet, but the reckoning already had. The door slammed open just as I finished reviewing the final transition memo on the screen. No knock. No warning. Just a storm surge of Marcus Vance in full meltdown mode, veins in his neck twitching like power lines in a windstorm. "You smug little parasite," he hissed. Shutting the door behind him like that gave him control of the room. Wrong. This wasn't his office anymore. This was my office now. Corner window. Skyline view. Same leather chair he used to prop his ego up on. Same shelf where he once displayed 5 fake top innovator awards he'd bought into. But the nameplate on the desk was gone, and Marcus looked like a man clinging to the edge of a cliff with greased up hands. I didn't stand, didn't blink, just looked up from the laptop and waited. He paced once, twice, then turned and pointed a trembling finger. You think you won something here? That this coup makes you some kind of goddamn queen. I don't think I'm a queen, Marcus, I said, voice calm as anesthetic. But you sure do look like a man without a throne. He barked a laugh, sharp and cracked. This isn't permanent. These people, your Phoenix pals, they're just here for money. They'll bleed this place dry and move on, and you'll be left cleaning up the mess. I tilted my head. Funny, that's exactly what I've been doing for 3 years. His eyes narrowed. He tried another tactic. Look, he said, switching tones like a malfunctioning robot. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I'll admit I misread the room. Maybe I didn't always give you the credit you deserved. But it doesn't have to get ugly. It already is ugly, I said, folding the laptop shut. You just finally have to look at it. He took a step closer, dropped his voice. I can fix this. You want your old role back? Done. VP of Strategy and Innovation. Full autonomy. Hell, push for an equity stake. You and me, we could run this thing together. I'll even take a back seat publicly. It was almost impressive how quickly he could pivot from tyrant to weasel to best friend. I don't want my old job, Marcus, I said. I want accountability. His face twitched just slightly, and then he gave me the most pathetic tool in his arsenal, a pseudo-apology. You have to understand, he said, tone full of manufactured regret. Pressure does things to people. I was trying to protect the company. Sometimes lines get blurry. I may have made some questionable calls, but I never meant to hurt you. I stared at him for a long moment, then stood, walked around the desk, stopped a foot from him, and placed a single piece of paper in his hand. He looked down. It was one of the invoices. Sloan Avery, Consulting Services, $8,200. He looked up. For the first time since I met Marcus Vance, I saw fear in his eyes that wasn't just for show. This one's dated the same weekend you were in Lake Tahoe for the Executive Culture Summit. I said, odd. Considering there was no summit, no attendees, no budget approval, just you and her on the company dime. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. This is just one. I added, flipping another sheet from the folder. I've got 13 more cross-reference with hotel bookings, card statements, and internal email metadata. You'd be amazed what an NDA-free analyst can do when she doesn't have to lie for you anymore. He swallowed. The room was so quiet. I could hear his heartbeat in the space between his gulps. You're bluffing, he said, weak. I leaned in, close enough to smell the fear behind the cologne. Sit in the meeting, Marcus. Smile. Nod. Stay quiet. And when you're called on, you'll agree with every change we propose. Because if you don't, the board won't just vote you out. They'll feed you to the feds. I stepped back, straightened my blazer. Now get out of my office. He stood there, still clutching the paper like it might dissolve in his hands. Then he turned and walked out, slower than he came in, quieter, smaller. The door clicked shut behind him, and I exhaled. Not relief, not triumph, just clarity. He was exactly the man I always knew he was. And now, so was everyone else. They packed us into the auditorium like sardines in a tin full of tension. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, but the room itself was silent. No idle chatter, no casual phone checking, just a collective inhale of 100 employees waiting to find out if they still had jobs, and maybe, just maybe, who the new gods were. I stood alone at the podium. No Marcus, no board, just me holding the floor like a lit match above dry kindling. I scanned the crowd and saw all of them. People who used to avoid eye contact in the elevator. People who nodded along when Marcus threw me on the bus. People who whisper my name now like it was an urban legend. And then there was him. Front row. Third chair from the left, Marcus Vance. Slumped just enough to hide the twitch in his jaw, but not enough to disappear. Suit perfect. face pale, eyes locked on mine like he couldn't decide whether beg or bluff. I took a breath. My name is Cynthia Lang. I said into the mic, some of you remember me. For those who don't, I used to be your senior strategic analyst until I was fired for what Mr. Vance referred to as a lack of vision. You could hear the whisper ripple across the room like static. No one dared to move. Today, I continued, voice steady, Phoenix Capital has finalized its acquisition of Vance and Whitaker. I've been appointed lead transition consultant. What that means, plain language, is that the leadership of this company now answers to me, and I answer only to results. I pause, let it sink in. Let them all feel the tectonic plates shifting under their chairs. My first directive is simple. I said, we will be implementing the company-wide strategic overhaul I submitted 4 months ago, the same plan that was dismissed as uninspired. It will go into effect immediately. A few heads turned, eyebrows rose. Somewhere near the back, I heard the soft exhale of someone who just realized their department might actually survive this. But I wasn't done. I turned my gaze direct, unblinking on Marcus. He didn't flinch, not visibly. But I saw his fingers tighten around the armrest, a twitch in the temple, the beginning of the end. As for Mr. Vance, I said, he will not be terminated. Murmurs. He sat straighter. Hope flickered across his smug little face. But I added, voice sharp enough to cut silk, his talents will be redirected. The room went dead again. Effective immediately, Mr. Vance is reassigned to oversee the digitization of every archive project file from the last 10 years. This includes contract scans, budget breakdowns, correspondence, and physical documentation. All of it. We estimate approximately 6,200 files. A pin dropped somewhere. His new office will be located in Sublevel B, Storage Unit 11A, next to Facilities Maintenance. His direct supervisor will be Karen from accounting. Karen, mid-50s, visor-wearing, expense audit queen, sat in the second row, face neutral, arms crossed like a judge who'd already sentenced him. She has graciously agreed to monitor his output and provide weekly progress reports, I continued. Started with the audit of his own expense records, which he has documented thoroughly for this exact occasion. Silence. Then one snort, then two, then laughter. Not loud, not wild, but stunned, breathless laughter that spread like a viral infection. Suppressed giggles, chuckles masked with coughs. Even the AV guy by the wall shook with restrained glee. I didn't smile. I just looked at Marcus. He looked like he wanted to crawl inside the upholstery and disappear. Dismissed, I said, walked off the stage to a sea of disbelief and slow building applause. Outside, the sky was gray, heavy with the kind of rain that cleans everything. I stood at the glass window in the hallway and watched it start to fall. Marcus would be down there soon, in that concrete box of a room with no windows and flickering lights, digitize his legacy, one dusty failure at a time, under Karen's watchful eye. It wasn't mercy. It was truth. And for the first time in years, the company had a chance to rebuild without lies. The bridge behind me was ash and the future. It finally belonged to someone who earned it. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.